Social media marketing can feel like a hamster wheel sometimes. You always have to be on your content game, and just when you think you've got it nailed down, the well is dry again. And as your business grows, the value of your time climbs, and spending time on social media becomes more and more costly, and sometimes less and less effective as you're spread more thin. This week, my guest is Tamika Awai, and she's talking me through how she helps niche business influencers develop an evergreen content layer which does two key things. It cuts through the noise, and it delivers the key messaging you need. Tamika's message could really help take the pressure off your social media. She's changed the way I think about social media content, and hopefully she'll bring you a new perspective too. Hi there, and welcome back to Amplify, the Digital Marketing Entrepreneur Podcast. I'm Bob Gentle, and every Monday I'm joined by amazing people who share what makes their business work. If you're new, take a second right now to subscribe in your player so you don't miss new episodes, and you can grab some older ones when you're done with this one. Don't forget as well, you can join my Facebook community. Just visit amplifyme.fm/insiders and you'll be taken right there. So, welcome along, and let's meet Tamika. This week, I'm delighted to welcome Tamika Awai to this show. Tamika and I are going to be speaking all things nurture, which is like super exciting. Tamika, why don't you start just by introducing who you are, where you are, and the kind of work you do?
Sure, absolutely, Bob. I am based in Canada, and I run a nurture marketing agency called Orisha Creative. We work almost exclusively with coaches and teachers and thought leaders, and we help them build out nurture marketing that keeps them off of the content creation treadmill, so not churning out endless content all the time. And we help them to fill their premium programs, their coaching programs in record time as a result. Because, Bob, as we will chat about, more nurture, better nurture, more strategic nurture, it does the job of closing the sale a whole lot more seamlessly.
So you work, I think, a lot of the time with people who understand what nurture marketing is. So let's come back to that in a little while. So for the business owner who's listening to this podcast thinking, oh, okay, I want to understand this digital marketing business. What's your definition of nurture marketing? How do you explain it to people who've never heard of it before?
Yeah, absolutely. So nurture marketing for me is the sort of process by which we really engage folks who are new to our world, so new leads, new folks come into our communities, and it's the process by which we help them prepare to make a buying decision. It's where we love on them, we build relationships, and ultimately we position ourselves, where it's true, but we position ourselves as the best, provider to solve whatever problem they've showed up in our communities to have solved.
And I'm quite accustomed to hearing about email list nurturing. Is your work predominantly sort of in the email space, or what sort of formats and platforms are you usually operating in?
Yeah, that's a great question as well. So email nurture is certainly part of what we do, but we also see nurture taking place on social media, right? We've got to, in this sort of world where we have cluttered inboxes and, everyone's screaming for attention, we're looking for the way to be able to connect with folks across the platforms that they can build a relationship with us. So we'll support clients with the nurture marketing on email and social media primarily, and we do have a handful of clients who, not in 2020, but who have done more of an in-person business, and so there are ways to nurture relationships through live events as well.
Right. I guess the reason I'm asking a few kind of daft laddie questions, we call them in this country, is in order that the listener can get a really clear understanding of what we're talking about. So you spoke about sort of getting off the content creation hamster wheel through nurture marketing. And I'm keen to dig into that a little bit, because podcasting is a hamster wheel. Blogging is a hamster wheel. YouTube is a hamster wheel. You have to show up week after week after week after week creating content, which is fine if you love it. And frankly, I love doing this podcast. It's about much more than content creation. It's about relationship building. It's about knowledge building. And the podcast the listener listens to, it's almost a byproduct. But for the average very busy coach, for the very busy business owner, time is probably the biggest barrier they have. So explain to me how you rescue people from this treadmill.
Yeah, absolutely. You're right. Like if you love these things, if you love podcasting, if you love, being up on social media 24/7, if you love YouTubing, any of those pieces, if it's a labor of love, there maybe isn't anything to do. But to your point, so many people are business owners, like they're super busy and they don't actually love the process of content creation, or they don't love the feeling that they have to be cranking something out new every single day or week, depending on the platform. So what we do differently, and sort of the new way to look at nurture that I like to introduce to folks, is that when you get really clear about the messaging that your ideal client needs to hear, like if you know the messages they need to see, hear, understand, if you know sort of the beliefs that they need to take on to be in a open position, ready to to buy and solve whatever problem it is that they have, if you know what that messaging is, you can kind of collapse down the amount of content that you need to create if you center it on those themes. And you can repurpose a lot, right? So you get into this place where you can be really in service of your community, but narrowing down the number of messages that are actually going out. And when you do that, as a byproduct, you don't really have to be creating something new all the time. Like the folks who really love content creation, who love podcasting or having a YouTube channel, you'll notice that they are usually having like a different conversation every week, or they are having content, what I kind of call popcorn content, like little bite-sized, tips and tricks and, little things that people can sort of digest, each day or each week, right? That's how they can be in that place of high frequency content production. And, if they love it, that's fine. Instead, when we flip and we really focus on the core messaging that needs to go out from a nurture marketing perspective, and we focus just on that, we realize like we don't have to say something new every single day or every single week. We can actually just ensure that our ideal clients are receiving those core nurture messages that they need to receive. And then we can start to play with having evergreen content or having and repurposing content. And so, the thing that our agency is known for is building out something I call the nurture matrix. And it's, a 90-day evergreen nurture sequence that rolls across email and social media. And it is all rooted in this sort of like, what are those core messages that people need to receive over and over? And the only sort of, or the kind of the next question that a lot of people have, Bob, is they're like, well, aren't people going to get tired of seeing the same messaging? And since we're so used to kind of prolific content creators who will create new content every day or every week in that high frequency, the average business owner doesn't know that there's another way to do things. And they actually think that the only way to do it is this, like, I need an editorial calendar. I need 365 days of content. I need to be producing all these things for all these different platforms, but the truth is if you laser in on what a new lead needs to receive to, be guided into the place where they're ready to make a buying decision, all they actually need are the core nurture messages that are going to take them there. So you can simplify things a whole heck of a lot if you let go of the idea that like my audience needs to receive all this, all this stuff and really just focus on what's like the meat and potatoes. So instead of kind of the popcorn, or amuse bush, what is the meat and potatoes messaging that an ideal client needs to receive? And, we've seen some really incredible results for our agency clients streamlining things this way.
See, this is a really nice way of looking at things. I think a lot of people are used to, as you said, the editorial calendar. They need to be creating content all the time. And I kind of think they should. But the frequency that a lot of people feel that they need to sustain, I think, is a lot higher than is reasonable for most business owners. And I like your idea of looking at what does the prospect need to know? What are the core messages that you need to be sort of dropping almost like breadcrumbs that lead towards that buying decision, that point of conversion? If you really focus in on those breadcrumbs, actually you need to be repetitive. You need to be sort of saying the same things in lots of different ways in order for them to finally go, oh yeah, you're the guy. Because as you said, most people, they're not sitting there consuming our content all day. They get little encounters here and there. And for most content creators, those encounters are going to be different every time. You're going to be talking about different things. And for the potential prospect, you haven't been consistent. You've been consistently visible, but you haven't been consistently saying the same thing again and again and really being clear on, this is who I am, this is what I do, this is the problem I solve, and this is who I'm for. So I really like that. When you talk about the 90-day nurture sequence, is that a sequence that you repeat or that you sort of recreate, or is it sort of 90 days and then, okay, next 90-day plan?
Right. That's a great question. So it's a framework more than like a formula that we operate with. So it is a little bit different for each client, kind of depending on who their audience is and also their own sort of, desire or sort of affinity for content creation. But generally we do repeat it, quarterly, so it'll roll out 3 or 4 times a year. And it really acts for a lot of our clients as like foundational content. Because the truth is, the folks that are most attracted to our work are actually really great content creators. They're brilliant content creators, but they get to a place in their business where they want to perhaps channel their creativity into another direction. We work with a lot of folks who have aspirations to author books or to take time off to become, really polished speakers and deliver a TED Talk, or, there could be any number of things that they want to do with their creativity. And so it's not that they don't want to create content, it's that they want to channel their creativity elsewhere. So what's really cool is that with our 90-day sequence, and when we have it rolling out on repeat sort of as a foundation, they don't have to worry about, showing up. Like, they don't have to get into that place of, oh my goodness, we don't know what we're saying for the next month, or, oh my goodness, I've got to, lock myself away and channel all my energy over in creating content. They've got the foundational content rolling out, and then, they get to show up as they feel inspired to. And so that happens a lot, but it typically is repeated for a lot of our clients at least, 3 or 4 times a year across social media. And then on email, it tends to be twice, like once or twice. They usually get it when they first, not when they first join a list, but if you can imagine, they sign up for whatever free lead magnet or opt-in is available, and they'll get whatever little intro sequence comes there. And then if they don't make an immediate decision to either get on a call or, buy, the initial offer or whatever the thing is, they are presented this, this nurture sequence, and it, rolls out usually around a weekly email, usually around 12 weeks. Although again, we've got clients who might do it a little differently depending on their marketing calendar, but that rolls off across email. And then they might do it another time in the year, maybe just prior to whatever sort of major active enrollment campaign they have. So the frequency looks like that on email. And then on social media, again, social is the place where frequency does matter. And you're right, like they do need to receive, your audience does need to receive messages every single day. So that's the place where we will repeat it maybe 3 or 4 times. And it's to be totally transparent, it's not usually the only content that rolls out. But again, that sort of relief of not having to come up with the new message every day, or not to have to come up with the editorial calendar, often for most business owners creates space. And in that sort of white space, the creativity drops in, and they're sort of like, oh, it would be really cool to do this. Or maybe for the first time, they realize, okay, with my core content rolling out, or my core nurture messages rolling out, maybe I would like to host a podcast and have that be, additional touch point and a way to build relationships, much like you were expressing that you enjoy about it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I think something I really like about the way you've described things, and I haven't heard it put quite like this before. It's a really nice framework that you have there. One of the things I love about it is everybody who knows about content marketing, so people like Gary Vaynerchuk or Chris Ducker, they regularly talk about you need to have a media company mindset. Gary Vaynerchuk says you need to be 80% whatever you do for money and 20% media company. And a lot of people instinctively think, well, that needs to be all me. And another set of people think, well, I just want to delegate all of that. And neither of those really work very well, because if you're doing it all yourself, you very quickly burn out. You become repetitive, or you don't really get the reach, and you don't grow as a business because it's time consuming. And if you accept, I've got to do this all myself all the time, as you suggested, your creativity can't grow into other more high value areas. But if you try and delegate it all, it loses all personality. It loses all integrity. And what I love about your way of doing things is it allows people to keep this foundational level of visibility that's really tactical. It's entirely congruent with that business owner. It allows them to add their own personal layer, but it's also very tactical. And I love that.
Well, thank you.
So what does your business actually look like? Who are your clients and how do they discover you?
Yeah, so our clients are, as I mentioned earlier, they're mostly coaches. They're in the coaching space. That could be health coaches, wealth coaches, relationship coaches, money coaches. And if they're not coaches, they tend to have coaching or mentoring types of elements to their business. So they might have courses or a mastermind. An example, one of our clients that we worked with for a good year or so now, she is a speech language pathologist and myofunctional therapist. And she,
Wow.
yeah. And I may have said that wrong. So Hallie, if you're listening,
No
my
know.
apologies. Exactly. Needless to say, she's in, sort of the medical therapy sort of space. And what she does is she actually has a course, a membership, and a mastermind community for other professionals in her same field who either want to deepen their skills in a particular area or have networking and continuing education opportunities. And then she has the mastermind for the folks who want to actually have their own, want to move from working for someone else's practice into moving their own. So there's a coaching sort of feel to it, even though she's not, kind of the traditional coaching model. So that's primarily who we work with. I've been asked before, could a nurture matrix work for another business or another type of business? I would say definitely for other service-based businesses, because when we're looking at our particular way of looking at and defining core nurture messaging is really around perspective shifting. We're very well tuned to developing messaging that help people shift their mindset so that they can take the action, right? Usually the reason someone hasn't solved a problem when it's something, when it's like an internal problem or, a transformation type problem it's usually their mindset is the biggest competition, right? It's not necessarily that they are like trying to decide which coach to hire. It's usually that they know which coach they should probably hire and they're kind of battling their inner game a little bit and kind of psyching themselves out and not taking that next step. So that's pretty common in the coaching world. And so the framework was really developed for that type of client. But other service-based businesses, I think, again, could benefit because there are similar elements of kind of selling the intangible, right? When you're in a service capacity. Could it work for a product business? I'm not sure that, it may be. I think the core framework, I think certainly could. The idea of, again, communicating kind of core messaging. I don't know if our particular way of doing it would work. We haven't played with a lot of products to do that. I really have a soft spot myself for kind of coaching and education and just sort of, self-transformation, personal development, all of that good stuff. So that's my little selfish way of being able to learn with every client. Every client that we work with, we get kind of like a master class. And even though I don't know the ins and outs of myofunctional therapy, there have been some things where I'm like, hey, you're I'm like sharing some of the knowledge. I'm like, you should check this person out because, X, Y, Z, I get all of these really cool tidbits and factoids that I get to share. So that's who we work with. And they typically find us, it's really interesting, for the first 2 years, and the agency is about 2.5 years old now. And until I would say June, that was when we hired our first full-time content marketing specialist. We were the content marketing agency or nurture marketing agency that really didn't do any outward marketing.
Yeah.
This is because we work exclusively with coaches and because, as you've so generously complimented me on, the framework is quite a different way of looking at things. So what typically would happen is, it's kind of like we had our first couple of clients who were, close contacts of mine, and then referral, which to me is always the highest compliment, for any work that we can do.
It absolutely is. I mean, one of the things that I've found intriguing with you, for somebody that does what you do, you have a very small online footprint, really.
Yeah.
And this will usually tell me one of two things. You're either really good at what you do or you're really bad at what you do.
That's a really great way of looking at it too. You're totally right. Thankfully, it's the former and not the latter.
Well, I know who you know, and I know who you're working for, and so it is the latter, former, latter. You're good at what you do.
Thank you.
And I think what's really nice about what you bring to the mix is a lot of people, especially in the online space, they always try and shout from the top of the funnel to the bottom saying, hey, buy my thing. It doesn't really work very well. And a lot of people, especially if they're new to digital marketing, this is how they'll approach things like Facebook ads, is they just try and use ads to sell things rather than use ads to build reach and brand awareness. And what I love about your business is it takes the whole buyer's journey into account. There's an impulse, there's a need, and that impulse, that need becomes conscious for a moment, and you think, I think I maybe need to take some action of some kind on this impulse. And maybe I want to buy a pair of shoes, maybe I want to hire a submarine, maybe I want to hire a coach. There's a buying journey for everybody. And that's what nurture is for. Nurture is for capturing somebody's attention when they've had that impulse and nurturing that impulse over time so that when somebody's ready to buy, they fall in your direction rather than someone else's. You're the guy they know. You're the person they've fallen in love with. And nurture is really, really important. And yet you can apply it in every business. But what I like about yours is you've decided, I'm going to focus on the people who I love serving. These are my people. And not simply going out looking for anybody that's in business and saying, hey, you need to look at nurturing. This is really cool. So well done for that.
Thank you.
It must be very tempting to sort of look all around for companies with money and say, and wave your hand like everyone else, but you don't need to. That's what I love.
Thank you. Yeah, it is, it is pretty tempting. I've had folks, as we kind of grow the agency and think about scaling and everything else. I have had a couple of colleagues and, well, this would really work for, XYZ industry. And I just sort of, I'm like, yes. And, maybe one day, this agency may grow beyond me and maybe I'll have another CEO and they can make that decision. But for now, being the CEO, I'm like, this is the one place that I get to be self-serving. I absolutely am in love with the coaching industry. There are certainly, as with every industry, there are some shadow sides to it and some things that you're kind of like, is this the way we want to operate? But I love being able to elevate and amplify the voices of online leaders who I believe in and care about and know that they legitimately do incredible work. So for anyone who is sort of, thinking, hey, let me check Arisha Creative out on social media, please also follow, any of the clients that we feature, and we do feature them regularly because they are incredible coaches as well.
And they are. A lot of them really are, because I know some of them. And I'm curious to know, you come across as very competent and skilled, and you clearly know where you're going. But in any business owner, that's only half the picture. Where do you find you actually struggle the most?
And this is like it always feels like that job interview question, where they ask you like, can you tell me your weaknesses or whatever? I am forever the recovering perfectionist. So the place that I struggle the most truly is in growing team and in delegating, so I was sharing that I hired my first full-time person. And so she is experiencing sort of the evolved version of my leadership, and I'm sure she's very grateful for that. And I'm, we're building the business together in a way that I'm able to leverage her brilliance and also, build that trust where I'm like, yep, you've got this. It's all good. But yeah, the hardest part is like not, is I guess kind of limiting the agency's growth, because I do care so deeply about sort of every single, email that is, created through a nurture matrix, and every, social post that goes out. And so you can imagine that if your brain, and your heart is holding all of that for your clients, that also limits the growth. So I think if I was a different type of leader, maybe a less of a perfectionist in practice, maybe we would have a much bigger social media following, and maybe, we'd have like double, triple, whatever, the clients. But at this point, I am happy to be the boutique agency that's growing. And, we're working on some things to change and tighten up the way that we deliver certain things so that I can, I can be better supported. But yeah, I love to hold on to all of the little details and, make sure they're absolutely perfect, which, we both know doesn't exist. So that can be a
No.
fun game in itself. But yeah, that would be that's like my downside. That's my little Achilles heel.
Yeah, perfectionism as a moving target you will never, ever hit. I guess something else I'm curious to ask, and this question may go somewhere bad. So if it does, I'll take the question out afterwards. But I'm curious to know, your business rather seems like it's quite linear. You sell a service. Are there any other revenue streams alongside that? Or are you planning any other revenue streams?
Yeah, great question. And I think it'll go just fine. Thank you for asking. Um, so, we do the Nurture Matrix as a project, and it's, that's kind of our bread and butter, or our front door offer, if you will. And then we do have clients who, after the experience of having worked with myself and the team and having, I think, the other byproduct, besides kind of walking away with having this evergreen nurture sequence and knowing how to roll it out and everything else, one of the things that my clients really love most, or from that initial experience, is having another brain, a marketing brain that they really connect with, who is able to pull out clearer messaging and help them to really elevate the way that they've been communicating with their audience. And so, after, or even usually it's the clients who step into the next way that we serve, they're usually asking after like the first month. They're like, hey, so can we stay together forever? How can I would love to talk messaging, in other areas of my funnel, or, I'd love to talk messaging about my upcoming, launch or enrollment campaign or whatever. And so the other revenue stream that we have is an ongoing retainer. It's my marketing director on demand program. And it's kind of like what it sounds like. A lot of coaches, they, and this isn't true for everybody, but what I tend to see is that as they're growing and they start delegating out content creation and marketing, they often end up in a place where they have, maybe a project manager and maybe a business manager, and then a bunch of, marketing related contractors. So maybe a copywriter and, graphic designer, all of those things. But they're usually missing a marketing director, right? And
Yeah.
so what I mean by that, like the business manager's off mostly handling operations, and, sometimes they'll come in and kind of chime in. But otherwise, it ends up being, the client, the coach, communicating big vision marketing things to a project manager, when a project manager's skill set is best used in kind of breaking down the tasks. Like they aren't necessarily the ones that can go from big visionary conversation to having overall creative direction, and then just all the steps of what to do, right? The steps of what to do they can handle, but that kind of translating the vision into some creative direction that the entire marketing team can act on that's usually the gap that's missing. And so the coach will end up, wearing that hat, and something always gets lost in translation, or they feel stifled because they're kind of telling the team what to do all the time rather than collaborating and coming up with things that are even better, right? So once they have that experience, or a version of that experience with me as we create their nurture messaging, they are sort of like, how else can we implement this? And so we'll step in and we'll support them. It's kind of like an ongoing retainer. We've got clients who have, been in that recurring sort of program or retainer for a year and a half, almost like since we started, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that retainer space makes a lot of sense for you, because successful people will want more of whatever it was that made them successful. So yeah, that makes perfect sense.
Yeah. So we do that. And then at some point, I've kind of been playing with different ways, like, does the Nurture Matrix framework, it could easily become a course or something like that. So I've thought about that sometimes, and, kind of what that would look like. And I've also had the sort of thought in my head around potentially certifying like social media managers or other folks on using the same process as well. So who knows if that'll get birth, but that's been tossed around a couple times as well.
And you haven't been tempted, working with coaches so much, to think there's probably a coaching business here?
there, I've thought of it, but I know that I am not a coach. I'm very much like the consultant strategist, and I'm like, you need to do it like this. Whereas coaching is very much like help the person arrive at their own conclusions, and their person, they need to kind of make their own decisions. And I'm straight up. I'm like, no, it needs to be, we can talk about it for a little while, but I'm gonna tell you right now, it needs to be X, Y, and Z.
Well, I'm going to offer a different perspective on this, because what you described as somebody who helps them arrive at their own decisions, for me, that's a mentor. Whereas a coach knows how to do it, knows how it should be done, can be done systematically and predictably, and says you need to do this. So when I'm hiring a coach, I'm looking for a coach that's going to say, you need to do this, and is going to help me understand why, and then hold me accountable to that. If you hire a tennis coach, why are you hiring a tennis coach?
True. That is a great perspective. Thank you.
So I think coaches come in different flavors, and they're not all about sort of the gently leading you. Sometimes it's the kick up the ass that's needed.
Yeah, you know what? That's a really great perspective. And it also speaks to the, kind of the coaching industry. There are so many different, to your point, flavors of coaches, which is why it's a lot of fun to play in that space. So maybe I'll revisit that.
Just putting it out there.
Thank you.
I love your business. I think nurturing is something people rarely think about unless they're quite well embedded in the business. But even then, it's often something that we really isolate down to thinking about email marketing. But looking at it from a much broader perspective is so useful. I guess what I would like to know is, obviously everything comes back to vision at the end of the day. When you started this business, you started it because of why ever you started it. But your vision probably isn't the same now. I mean, I'm curious to know, where does Tamika want to see her business going in 4 years, 5 years? Who do you want to become? And what does your personal brand journey look like? Because doing what you're doing is quite unique, but everybody wants things to grow. Everybody wants things to be bigger. What does your dream look like?
Yeah, that's a really great question. I've been doing some very interesting kind of visioning work and stuff like that, as we mentioning, kind of retooling the way that we deliver some things. And so the vision and kind of values and all that piece have been a part of it. I think ultimately, and you're right, the vision when I started this agency, I don't even know that there was a vision because because it was just sort of like, I never imagined having an agency at all. It was not a thing that I thought I would do.
So why did you do it?
Yeah, I was content marketing manager for a very successful coach, 7-figure, kind of coaching business, really well known. And I was, working in kind of a contractor role. And, so contractors, often there's a cap on income. So, because everyone's got a marketing budget and there's a budget, right? So I was looking at the numbers and sort of saying, I can't work forever for this one client. What else might it? And I don't want to just kind of replicate this and do the same thing for other folks, because I can see where my time will either get destroyed. And I've got a couple of kids, so I'm like, I'll either have no time for anything else, but a handful of clients. So I started to think about, like, what could I do that's bigger than me? And I think when I started it, I was like, the income piece, and then also sustainable, like, what can I do that's sustainable? And then the other piece of it was that I noticed in her business that gap that I mentioned earlier. We were in that place where it was, even though I was content marketing manager, I didn't start that way. I kind of grew into that. When I started, I was kind of a content creator or something like that. And I identified this place of kind of, we've got a business manager, and I'm supposed to be, creating the content, but I spend a heck of a lot of time on messaging and big vision and kind of where the whole communication arc is going to go. So that was an opportunity for me to really own my skills. I came from corporate marketing, but 10 years prior. And so I had been laid off, before I started in running my own business in 2010. So anyway, I sort of saw what was going on for that particular client, and I was just, I could see the opportunity to really help and support her and support myself. So I'm very much about the win-win-win. So when I started the agency, it was really, the vision was, I'm going to run this thing. It's going to be a win-win-win for everybody, myself included. Away we go. What it turns into, who knows, right? But it's just, looking for that ultimate win-win-win. I think now that I've been at it for a couple of years, coming into year 3, the vision really is to, I mean, number one, we still are limiting ourselves with the number of coaches that we can support, and yet the coaching industry is growing day by day. I think the most recent stats I saw, it's like a $15 billion industry. There are, several 100,000 coaches just in North America alone. So, and I do believe, there may be some that are coming from the wrong intention and aren't that skilled, and putting shingles out in front of their door, one day and just deciding they're a coach with kind of no background. And there are a ton of very brilliant leaders who have the capacity to help so many people, self-actualize, use their creativity, create their own businesses. Like, I'm a stand for, using all your gifts and monetizing them where it makes sense to do so. Like, kind of, I'm sort of down with the traditional workforce, if you will. It's great for some folks, and we can kind of see in a year like this how fragile that really is. So I am a stand for having, the messages and the mentorship that's needed to support people as we kind of, change the way that people work and live. Having those messages go out to bigger and bigger audiences. So, the real vision, Bob, is to see the agency grow to a place where we can be serving and supporting. Right now we maybe serve a few dozen coaches in a year. I would love to be in the place where we're serving and supporting, a few thousand coaches in a year, because we know the industry is big enough. And I believe that there are that many coaches and mentors who are needed and who are valuable. So, it's growth for sure over the next, 4 years. And also from a personal perspective, the goal is really, it's growth, but with me really stepping away from the perfectionist, leadership, and into the role, as visionary, leader in my own business. And this is the place where, I'm not always a super fan of all of Gary Vee's, methodologies, but this is the place where I do see my agency going. Like, today we are supporting others in streamlining content and messaging, and helping them to connect with their audiences in a much deeper way, and so that they can fill programs and all those things in an effortless way. And I do think in the next chapter there may be a version of a media company, like Orisha Creative, not just helping coaches and mentors to do this within their business, but also having platforms to be able to do some of that amplification and elevation of their messages ourselves, just to step up and support that way.
See, now that's quite an exciting vision. I really like that.
Thank you.
So, Tamika, if people want to connect with you, how would you like them to do that?
Yeah, we are on social, and that's a really great place to connect. As you mentioned, we're growing our social. We would love to connect with more folks there, so you can follow us at Orisha Creative on Instagram, and we're on Facebook as well at Orisha Creative. So that's one way to stay in touch. And if anyone is sort of curious about, the nurture matrix and how to start looking at their own nurture content in a much more strategic way, we just created we didn't just create it. It's existed in our business for quite some time. It's the sort of step zero for a lot of our clients in their journeys with us. But it's a nurture opportunity scorecard. So what it is an assessment that you can, and it comes with a video to help you figure out what all these different buckets mean. But it's the assessment we use to be able to show our clients sort of what the gaps and opportunities are within their existing nurture marketing, and it just sort of serves as a basis for our work with them. But you can get a copy of that yourself if you go to nurturematrix.com/scorecard, and you can download it. There's a video, and it'll help you to look at both, sort of the composition of your nurture marketing, as well as the messaging that's rolling out as well, so you can start to look at things just a little bit more strategic. So again, that's nurturematrix.com/scorecard.
And I'll put a link to that in the show notes. Tamika, you have been an awesome guest. It's been great fun, and I've learned tons, so I'm really grateful for that. I should bring things to an end with the question that I remember now. I don't think I've forgotten this question for a long time. What's one thing you do now that you wish you'd started 5 years ago?
Yeah, that's a really great question. And guess what? It is email list building and maintenance. We don't have a terribly large email list. And, it's interesting because you could sort of argue, well, your business 5 years ago didn't exist. And so, what would be the point? And the point for me would really be, I am amazing at building relationships, meeting new people, and, have had various journeys, various lives as an entrepreneur. But I wish that there was a through line, and I wish that I had created a list, cultivated a list, and kind of maintained relationships through email marketing, because that's always for our own business. And it's why when I step in and I'm working with clients and they say to us, even super successful folks are like, yeah, we haven't really been, up and up on the email, but email marketing is so valuable. Even if you're changing, directions, having an email list that I just kept in touch with regularly from a personal perspective, even if it wasn't from a business perspective, I could see how that could be super duper valuable right now. So I wish that, that was the one place that I practiced what I preach. And I have made peace with the fact that for a while I've sort of run the agency kind of like the cobbler whose kids have no shoes. Right. So we're changing all of that now. But if I could go back 5 years, I would do just that.
But I think for anybody listening, anybody that's been listening for a long time will start to see a pattern in the answers that people give. And your answer is one of the most common. People need to learn from that and think, okay, everybody's saying list building. So anybody listening, list building.
Start today.
Yeah. Tamika, you've been an awesome guest. I'm really grateful for your time. It's been lovely to meet you. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Bob. I had a wonderful time chatting with you too.
If your approach to social media is like a cat with its ass on fire, then maybe taking a little of Tamika's approach could really help take the pressure off. I'll be reviewing my own approach based on this and hopefully freeing up some time to focus on what it's all about. Relationships, not content. Before I go, just a quick reminder to subscribe, and if you haven't already joined my Facebook group, you'll find a link in the show notes or visit amplifyme.fm/insiders. I would love for you to connect with me on social media. You'll find me wherever you hang out. Just search for @BobGentle. And if you do connect, let me know. That way I can follow you back. If you enjoyed the show, take a second right now, and I mean right now, to leave a review on iTunes. It would mean so much to me, and it's the best way to help me reach more subscribers. My name is Bob Gentle. Thanks again to Tamika for giving us her time this week, and most importantly, to you for listening. And I will see you next week.